Some people have said the World Cup has been somewhat predictable and boring, but Ryan, this morning, Thursday morning, we woke up and news of Typhoon Hagibis, rather ominously named, causing some havoc and 2 games called off. It's the first time in World Cup history, so pretty unprecedented for 2 games to be called off due to weather. A lot of people coming out and saying, how can a massive event like this not have another backup plan for games to be moved? So it's caused a bit of controversy. Obviously, there are some big games still to come this weekend. The massive one, really, the headline fixture was Scotland-Japan. That one's still under a bit of a cloud, if you can use that wording. But it's whoever finishes top of that pool, Pool A, is going to have an effect on who the Boks play in the quarterfinals. So there's quite a lot of talk and a lot of things that can come out of this weekend. What have you made of just this news of the weather and how it could affect the tournament? It's been quite a strange curveball for this final little lap of the pool phase.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand people's outrage about like a reserve day, so to speak, but just when you're moving that amount of people around the country, trying to coordinate that is like nearly impossible. Well, it is impossible. Like, people's travel plans, do they book for an extra day in case of all of those types of things? You just can't. I just think the way the World Rugby is done it is the right way. You can't account for sort of natural acts like this. You just can't. So I think it's a fair way to do it. I mean, obviously they knew it was typhoon season in Japan, but what do you do about that? And I think you've just written a piece on SARugbymag, and people can check it out there about the kind of implications of what it means if the Japan fixture is called off. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like Ireland and Samoa, that will still go ahead. So Ireland, I think, will bag the full haul of log points from that, and then they'll move to the top of Pool A.
Yeah.
And then that leaves kind of Japan and Scotland to determine how that game goes ahead. Japan, if it's called off, let's maybe start there. If it's called off, Japan can still finish level with Ireland, and then on the first tiebreaker, which is depends on who's won that pool game. So
right.
Even if Japan finish level with Ireland, they'll top the group, and obviously then that's, if I'm correct, if they top the group, they'll play us.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's a good transition to the next talking point. Like, people have been going like, would you rather play in the quarterfinal? Like, for me, it's a no-brainer. We want to play Japan.
Yeah.
Like, on what planet do you not want to play Japan as opposed to playing Ireland?
Yeah.
It baffles me, really. Like I know we've been haunted by that result at the last World Cup, but really, man, like, Japan are a good side who deserve massive respect, and they'll be a good test for the Springboks. But I don't know, like, it's just, like I said, I've been baffled by this whole kind of conjecture around who the Springboks would want to play. Every day, Japan.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that the alternative is Scotland are really trying to put pressure on World Rugby to talk about a contingency plan or to make some kind of alternative arrangement, because they really want that game to go ahead. What they're looking to do is lie in wait, create a bit of an ambush. If they beat Japan, I think if they beat Japan with a bonus point or even without it, as long as they deny them a losing bonus point, they could then go level with Japan, and then on that basis of that tiebreaker of who won the pool game, they would then finish ahead of them. So they could knock Japan out, having, again, Japan could go 3 games out of 4, as they did at the last World Cup, and still not progress. So that's what Scotland want to do. They want to sneak in, and then that would be interesting, because then Ireland would finish top of Pool A, and they would end up playing us. So, like
Scotland,
you say, that's
for the sake of the tournament, Scotland just need to go home. I want to see Japan go through. It would be amazing. John Cardinelli, who's there now, has spoken about this love that the Japanese people have for South Africa, and I think just for the atmosphere, the vibe, Japan also. I mean, over and above that, the key thing is that I think Japan deserves to go through. They've definitely progressed since the last World Cup tactically, and I enjoy the philosophy that they apply to how they play. I mean, I can see Scotland's point of view, but yeah, just let them go home already and let South Africa play Japan in the quarterfinal.
Yeah, I think maybe we just touch on that one point. I know you're saying any day of the week, you're sure you want to play Japan rather than Ireland. But for me, it hasn't really been touched on all that much. Is that Japan in 2015, when they beat the Box, it was this most remarkable miracle of Brighton. No one could believe it. It was like, the end of days for South African rugby. 4 years later, they beat Ireland. A relatively muted reaction to that massive upset. And now suddenly, just within the space of 4 years, Japan being viewed as a real proper rugby nation, a team to be respected, to be kind of feared on their home ground with massive support behind them. It's a little bit of a story that maybe hasn't got as much airtime as it deserves, how they went from being regarded as a minnow at the last World Cup and creating what is seen as an anomaly, a once-off upset against the Box. Now, if they had to play against the Springboks, you're not going into that game expecting South Africa to win by 30 points. You're going,
sure.
It could be a nervy game. It could be one where if Japan start well and the crowd gets behind them, you never know. I mean, Ireland saw that happen to them. They backed that up with another win. So Japan have shown just how capable they are, and it's quite a remarkable story, I think, of how they've progressed in 4 years. Maybe the Super Rugby involvement they've had has been a helping factor, but Jamie Joseph has done an amazing job with that team.
Yeah, no question. And look, there's no disrespect that I mean to Japan by saying that we'd rather play them in the quarterfinal than Ireland. But having said that, like, the Springboks are a better team than Japan. They are undoubtedly a better team than Japan.
Yep.
The gulf in quality between us and Ireland is smaller. And so on that basis, I go like, we've got a better chance of beating Japan than we do Ireland. And as a South African who wants to see the Boks go all the way, that for me is the clincher. But coming to Japan, like I just mentioned, like, I've really been impressed by particularly the structure around their game. And in the previous World Cup, they were a little bit looser, a little bit more unstructured, and as a result, a little bit more defensively vulnerable. And I don't see that in their game now. Certainly, there are deficiencies. Every team has them. But the opportunities that they give for the opposition to inflict, to score points based on their own mistakes, their own tactical shortcomings, that gap is definitely shrunk.
Yeah.
So I enjoy them. I enjoy how they earn the right to play wide. They've got a couple of good strike runners in that pack, and then in the back line as well. Their patience has been a marked kind of feature of the game. And like you say, those are all things that come with great coaching. And so I tip my hat to their coaching staff in that regard.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that I think the Springboks on their day are better than Japan. Like, there's no question about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if they play Ireland, I don't think Ireland have looked really like world beaters so far in the tournament. So I think the Boks should win against Japan or Ireland. I would back them. I think hard to judge too much into the game against Canada, and obviously the Boks even against Namibia. A couple of soft pool games, and they haven't really been properly tested yet. They had a red card in the game against Italy, so it's been quite difficult to judge exactly where the Boks are in the World Cup opener against the All Blacks. They had some good and bad moments, and then since then they haven't really had a real test. So for them, it's going to be interesting how they manage that, and a massive break between their last pool game and the quarterfinal. So whether there's a potential for them to come in to their quarter even a little bit undone, it could be a factor. So they're going to have to manage how they prepare for that game. For me, I still think we're looking potentially at an All Blacks Springboks final. There's not too many other teams that have really looked to me like they're going to go all the way to the final too. I don't know if there are any other teams that have really impressed you. England probably hovering.
Yeah, there. I've been impressed by England, but you also kind of you can only play what's in front of you, right? So it's always hard to judge. Yeah. Unlike a cricket World Cup format or a football World Cup format where there's more strength versus strength kind of contests in the early parts of those tournaments. And you can kind of make educated guesses on how teams you can track their progress into the knockout stage of the tournament. The Rugby World Cup is different, just because there's like a mix of Namibias and Canadas with the All Blacks and Springboks, so it's hard. So you can only play what's in front of you. But I have been impressed by the way the Springboks have cleaned up areas of their game that was a little bit messy against the All Blacks. Undoubtedly, a team like Ireland can exploit the deficiencies and maybe some, areas that we haven't developed and progressed in. No question. But at this point, like I see England as a strong contender, but I agree with you. The All Blacks and Springboks just seem that level above everyone else, based on who they've played so far.
All right, cool. Well, let's wrap there, Ryan. Thanks very much, and we'll keep an eye on the weather, obviously, this weekend. But the big game for Bok fans is that one between Scotland and Japan to keep an eye on.